This map and mission was made by Pershing. He contacted me if I would have interest in making a cinematic for his mission, and this is the result. If you want to play this mission for yourself, the link to this mission on the Steam Workshop can be found in the description down below. It is important to note that the creator wants me to inform you guys that there are historically inaccuracies when it comes to used armor and weaponry. Enjoy the rest of the video. Lights on the horizon at the edge of the city. Britain has sent in its tanks, and Operation Crusader is in full force. The Germans on the left flank take a beating. More of the Iron Titans roll in as the infantry seeks through the few areas covered by mere grass. The first of the tanks gets hit with anti-armor shells that stop them in their tracks. The assault for them is over, but now they provide cover for their fellow mates. An allied tank with a damaged track is like a sitting duck, making it an easy kill for the Germans. Visibility in the night is limited, and many shots never find their target. But the artillery is stoic and brash, ripping its victims to shreds. By using more wrecks as cover, the infantry managed to get closer. They found themselves exchanging fire with a couple of Germans held up behind a row of sandbags. The upsweeping sand and dust from the explosions made it even more difficult to see. Many had to entrust their vision to the tank's headlights. As the Brits came closer to the checkpoint, German tanks started to fire back as well, its deadly shells ricocheting off the armor or achieving its goal by creating a deadly hit. Some of the soldiers exchanged the cover of tanks for that of the safety of the walls of buildings. The Germans had set up positions, however, to take out those who tried to get through the small alleyways. The British sent in more tanks, of which they had plenty, and one German panzer crew felt brave enough to replace their fallen comrades at the center crossroads. Though their intent was noble and brave, it fell short quickly as they could not withstand the wrath of the incoming fire as the British broke through the first line of defense. Though most of the Germans had retreated back into town, the broken down panzer created an ambush point for the soldiers who were still operating the AT weapon. The overzealous Allied tank crew got surprised as they thought the area was clear. Alarmed by the situation, most of the armor headed to the right flank through the fields. The battle had already cost the lives of many infantry, but a group of soldiers decided to flank the AT gun to create room for their fellow tankmen. Their attack failed, though they did manage to take out a few Germans in the process. The British kept on moving and pushing. They kept in, sending more tanks as they lost them, and the infantry captured the first trenches, utilizing them to their advantage. It gave them much needed cover and a break of pace as the tanks rolled forward as their battering rams. The battlefront shifted and drew closer to the important bridge that would be vital for any party who owned it. More AT was set up, heavily fortified and defended. The Allies sent in a new wave of tanks and men, assuring them that the town will be in their hands by dawn. The open fields that were once covered with grass and ferns turned into a treacherous obstacle covered with burning wrecks and body parts. The field gave the Germans the perfect opportunity to fire from a great distance. The infantry could finally move through the buildings without the fear of being shot to pieces. One of the Allied tanks stormed right through the German defenses and had reached the edge of the bridge. But they were all alone, and resistance deployed on the opposite side quickly took the tank apart, leaving it dead in its tracks. The crumbling of nearby buildings signaled to the troops at the bridge that the Allies were coming for them. The crossing of the road in front of the bridge had started. It was a dangerous short crossing, as the infantry had to briefly leave any cover behind to head closer to the Germans. They were easy pickings for the German armor at the river. Few buildings still stood high without any scars, but the bouldering tanks and artillery quickly flattened the once civilized areas in seconds. The Germans had anti-air on some of the rooftops that they turned into anti-tank. Their oversight gave them a great advantage, and all the units at the bridge had now engaged with the enemy. Several of the Allied armor that had their tracks damaged but were still able to shoot proved useful as static turrets to cover their fellow soldiers. The more tanks were destroyed, the more it seemed they sent in for reinforcements. Many of them never made it to the edge of the river. The artillery station on the roof simply were too overwhelming, as the crossing of the field created all new possible threats from incoming German fire. Another tank managed to reach the front of the bridge, but once again got taken out in mere moments. The infantry behind it tried to capitalize on the moment by taking out the Germans distracted by the armor, but it was difficult to create an opening. In the streets, the Allies achieved more success as some of the troops fired back from inside the buildings, pushing the German defense line closer towards the bridge. The armor and artillery fought back hard to compensate. Especially one particular flak gun's vengeance was terrifying, as its reach seemed nearly limitless. Tanks all the way back at the edge of town got pulverized by its devastating power. The ground was scattered with craters of shells that never found their target. The Allies felt confident enough to send in another tank through the main street. The AT had been destroyed and the long road ahead gave the tank the opportunity to take out targets from afar. The Germans were now pushed back towards the bridge, but still held both sides. Allied command ordered an all-out push as several tanks headed forward, as they could see their target ahead in the distance. The infantry charged forward as well, but the bulk of the skirmish would need to be done by their fellow tanks. Much of the German AT was still operational, and the bridge area had now fully turned into a bloody battlefield. The Allied armor was finally close enough to silence the AA guns on the rooftops. Many of the Germans retreated across the bridge to hold the other side, but a few stood their ground to face the incoming horde. Piles of rubble and clouds of smoke and dust covered the advancing infantry as they sought opportunities to pick off targets foolish enough to show themselves behind their defenses. The German armor was crippled, and even the feared flak was taken out, leaving the Germans' defense at the bridge bare bones. More defenders were stationed further back, but their range was limited due to distance and angles. The Germans' morale wavered. The first of the men tried to cross the river, as did the first tanks. Those that tried quickly found themselves stuck, as their tracks got destroyed by mines or leftover anti-tank infantry. But no longer did the Germans possess equipment strong enough to completely destroy the tanks, and thus they turned to menacing turrets on their side of the bridge. More and more soldiers reached the edge of the river, but were ordered to wait the crossing of the bridge until more armor had crossed first to take out enemy targets. The fields were no longer a kill zone, though a bullet or two still found a way towards it. The area left behind was a horrifying, mechanized graveyard with wreckage as far as the eye could see. The farthest defenses of the Germans were alerted as well, as ricocheting tracer rounds flew over their heads. They knew the battle wasn't going their way. The troops felt confident enough to make the crossing, and accompanied their tanks to capture and secure the point. More tanks rolled in, as the men spread out and searched for any remaining opposition. They would still need to push through onto the last defense of the Germans, but the important bridge location which they needed to secure at all costs had been taken.